This is Keith Helwig from Cops Corrections Videos. I've talked in the past about what we can do to address shortages in staff in correctional institutions. Well, another area that is short-staffed these days are police departments. You know, back when I was younger and I was looking for a job as a police officer, you had to test, you had to take physical tests, you had to go on psychiatric evaluation, all different kinds of tests to get that job. And if you were lucky, you got put on a hiring list. Well, today, just about every department in this country of any size is advertising for officers. You know, it used to be the minimum qualifications. You had to have a couple years of college, you had to have some experience. Now, it's just about anything goes in a lot of different states. I know in Wisconsin, in order to be a certified police officer, you still have to have a minimum of 2 years of college, and you have to go through the academy, you know, and all that kind of good stuff. But I think in a lot of the bigger cities, they are so desperate to fill police positions that they're neglecting and negating a lot of the qualifications that officers had in the past. Now, that's not to degrade the officers that work for these departments, because there's some great officers working in a lot of the departments. What I think one of the biggest problems right now facing police recruitment is police officers not feel that not only will they not be backed up by the public, but they're not going to be backed up by upper administration. You know, I look at things like officers in Baltimore, where they're hung out to dry no matter what they do. I look at the officers in cities such as Portland or Minneapolis, where no matter what they do, the city council's not going to stand behind them. The police and fire commission's not going to stand behind them. Their own chiefs and captains are not going to stand behind them. If you want to build up a good quality department today that has good officers, that you aren't going to have to second guess everything they do, you're going to have to trust your officers to do the job, and you're going to have to support your officers when they do their job. Now, I'm not saying support them in good and bad. If an officer screws up, they screwed up, and they deserve to be held accountable for that screw up. But how many situations have you seen recently where an officer has defended themselves through the use of deadly force, and that officer is crucified? And this goes all the way back to Ferguson, with the officer there that shot Michael Brown. Well, if you look at the true facts of that case, and you ignore the narrative of BLM or things that want to have just their narrative placed, that officer acted entirely appropriately. Yet he was hung out to dry. He was hung out to dry by his community, he was hung out to dry by the media, he was hung out to dry by special interest groups that simply wanted to fulfill their own agenda. And I think that's one of the problems they're having with attracting police officers today. Police officers want to know that the administration is going to support them. They want to know that they're going to be supported by their superiors. They want to know that they're going to be supported by the public and the general officers. Other officers, I should say. I'm lucky. I work part-time for 2 small departments, and in both departments, I have superiors that support me. Now, if I do something wrong, and you know, let's face it, I've done things wrong, you know, whether it's mistakes in paperwork. I've never been accused of mistreating an individual or overuse of force. But if I've done something wrong, my chief will confront me about it. But if allegations are made against me, my chief will also check out those allegations and support me. You know, I think of an incident that I had, this is probably 3 or 4 years ago now, where I stopped at a gas station one morning. I was going to run in and get a cup of coffee, and a friend of mine was in there. In fact, he was a sergeant that used to work for me when I was a captain of the Department of Corrections. And he mentioned that he and his son were going to be stopping down at a local sports bar and having breakfast. And it's not really a sports bar, it's more of a restaurant, but they do serve alcohol there. And he invited me to stop down and have coffee while he and his son had lunch there. So I stopped down, and when I went in, the waitress asked me, you know, what I wanted, of course, and I told her a cup of coffee. And she said, regular decaf. I said, well, give me the hard stuff. Okay, no big deal, right? So I had a cup of coffee with my friend and his son. I was in there for probably 15, 20 minutes, and I left. Probably half an hour later, I got a call from my police chief asking me if I had the phone number of the last person I gave a citation to. Well, in Wisconsin, we take phone numbers for all citations. We do that in case there's a change of court dates, or if there's inadvertent error on the citation. So I did, and I asked what was going on, and she said, well, this person saw me standing at the bar of the log cabin drinking a beer. Well, my chief knew that that was a total BS, because for one thing, I don't drink. You know, I'll have a cocktail when I go out for supper or something like that, but I never sit at the bar and just drink. So anyways, I told her what happened, and she said, you know, Keith, I have due diligence when something like that's reported to me. She said, I have to check into it, and that's the same story that I got from the bartender. So she ended up calling up the individual and asking him about it, and at first he maintained that yes, he saw me clearly standing at the bar drinking a glass of beer. Well, by the time my chief got done telling him what was going to happen and he continued to make false allegations against one of her officers, the man was pretty much in tears. And the chief called me back and told me that he withdrew his complaint, that he decided not to move forward with it, and asked the quickest way that he could pay the citation that he'd received. She stood behind me. Now, it was a false allegation. I didn't have a body camera. I didn't have anything. Now, ask yourself, if that allegation was made against you, would your chief stand behind you? Would you have somebody that has your back? Upper administration has to have the back of their officers. When their officers are doing right, they have to have their back. When they're doing wrong, they need to take into consideration all the circumstances of what happened and make their decisions for discipline based on those circumstances. Don't discipline an officer based on public perception. Base them on the facts. Until next time, this is Keith Hellig, Cops Corrections Videos. Stay safe and watch your back.